today on Ag News Daily.
Our data continues to show us that there's a superior nutritional bundle made up of strong amino acids and a higher energy content. And that really is something that we're trying to make sure we educate people all around the world about.
And listeners, welcome back to the Ag News Daily podcast, our once weekly podcast episode. How's Michelle doing?
Good. A little cold, though, so I'm excited for spring. I'm not a winter person.
I do think there's a lot of people that have been saying the same things. Of course, when I get into the weather, we will come across quite a bit of that. But it's a wild time of year in the farming industry. We just got back from the National Farm Machinery Show last week, and at the end of next week, we go to the Commodity Classic. Have you been out and about?
Yeah, I'm in Minnesota this week, so maybe a bit cold. And then I'm going to my home campus next week. I'm at University of Wisconsin River Falls, and so making some travels, spending some time with family and friends, and of course, telling some stories.
Hey, that's good. That's what we're here for. So let's jump into that weather. Although it might not be the news everybody wants to hear this time around. The cold air is going to stick around in the Midwest, at least for the next couple of days, but a warm-up is on the way. Temperatures are expected to rise this weekend with above normal readings, likely across most of the region next week. A few clipper systems moving through Canada could bring scattered precipitation by midweek. A larger storm system may bring widespread rain and even some snow. Behind that system, colder areas set to return back into this area late next week, reinforced by another clipper system moving. Heavy precipitation has already led water levels to rise and some minor flooding along the Mississippi River's tributaries. This could slow barge traffic. A brief break in the pattern early next week may offer some relief, but another system midweek is expected to bring more rain. Looking further into the 6 to 10 day outlook, shows near or below normal temperatures likely in the east, while much of us in the central and western will see warmer than normal conditions. Most of the country will experience near or below normal precipitation, though wetter than normal pockets are expected in northern tier and southern parts of Florida. So a good variety of spring weather and winter weather all combined.
Now, you mentioned last week you were at the National Farm and Machinery Show. Did you happen to see Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins?
We did not. She came in quite late that evening. It was a very interesting opportunity for her to be able to come in and see the tractor pull and walk around the show grounds. But we were all prepped if we wanted to return later. But we were out at a restaurant and did not make it back to welcome her to Kentucky.
Well, she addressed their 15,000 people at the show in Louisville, Kentucky. She met with more than 100 farmers to start off her kick to Secretary of Agriculture, listening to their challenges and opportunities firsthand. She has also attended another agricultural conference and made stops in Missouri and Kansas. In addition, the Trump administration has disrupted the U.S. response to the worsening bird flu outbreak, causing confusion and concern among federal staff, state officials, veterinarians, and health experts. The CDC has delayed 2 weekly reports on bird flu transmission and surveillance and canceled multiple meetings with state officials on the outbreak. Additionally, the CDC and USDA did not hold congressional briefings for 3 weeks, and the USDA failed to respond to a state's official request for information on a new food supply protection program. The result has been anxiety among federal health staff that critical information about bird flu will not be disseminated in a timely manner or at all, even as more people and livestock test positive for the virus. It remains really unclear how farmers will be affected by these staff reductions that I have seen throughout social media, expressing that they were, given off a reduction at the USDA. What we do know, though, is in a reporter call from U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley, he said some federal employees could take a buyout during the administration's 90-day review period, but he says that this is different than people that just got fired. Additionally, USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service and National Animal Health Laboratory Network were among the federal offices impacted by the layoffs. Like mentioned, I saw some of those social media posts over the weekends and how they weren't expecting to be laid off and how they impact the agriculture and some of our national parks. So we'll continue to follow that in hopes that we can get some more answers.
Yeah, you bet. Here in our area with some of the research facilities in Ames and tied to that land grant university, we certainly got to hear some of that news firsthand. In more USDA news, the agency announced yesterday that Secretary Rollins will honor previously paused contracts made directly with farmers under that Inflation Reduction Act. In a press release, the USDA confirmed it is releasing approximately $20 million in contracts for the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program, the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and others. Secretary Rollins stated that the Biden administration rushed out hundreds of millions of dollars in IRA funding that was supposed to be distributed over a period of 8 years. She added that careful review revealed that some of the funds were allocated to programs unrelated to ag, prompting a continued review process. However, she emphasized that funding directed towards farmers and ranchers who have already made investments in these programs will continue forward. This marks the first tranche of released funding, with additional announcements expected in the future. Well, our very own Delaney is in another country this week, and maybe we're envious of her travels, but let's get an update from her in this conversation right now.
Xin chào. Hello from Vietnam. Tanner and Michelle, thanks for coming on the podcast this week. Just wanted to come on and share a little bit about my experience here in Vietnam so far. This week, I've been traveling around with the Iowa Corn Growers Association's iLead program, and so far we've been to Saigon and now in Can Tho. We've been seeing poultry farms. We went to a banana farm, learned a lot of great stuff about U.S. agriculture and how Vietnamese agriculture is also partnering with the U.S. So we've seen a lot of great things. I'll be sharing more on the podcast when I'm back in the office here in just another short week. But maybe a couple of quick facts about Vietnam agriculture before I go. Vietnam is supposed to be one of the largest up-and-coming countries for trading partners for GDP growth. We learned this week that over the last 15 to 20 years, Vietnam has seen nearly double-digit growth in GDP, anywhere from 5 to 8% annually. So they're really going to be coming up and coming as a potential trade partner for the United States. Some of the key issues that Vietnam is focused on are increasing ethanol and higher blends of gasoline, really focused on developing new protein markets, as well as fruits, vegetables, fish and aquaculture, and a lot of other things. So far, we've seen, like I mentioned earlier, a banana farm where we got to see one of Vietnam's largest fresh produce farms. Unifarm is a farm just outside of Saigon where they produce bananas, melons, and a lot of other products. One of their largest export trading partners is, of course, China, but they're also working that by 2030 to be Vietnam's largest domestic supplier of fresh produce. We also went to a chicken farm where we learned a lot about broilers. Here in Vietnam, the Vietnamese consumer really prefers free-range chicken. So we learned that the Vietnamese farmers who raise free-range chickens can get anywhere from 3 to 5 times more than market price for their poultry products. Just a few fun facts that we've learned so far this week. Eating a lot of great food, experiencing the culture, and like I said, I'll share more when I'm back on the podcast in just a short week.
It remains to be seen if Congress can get a farm bill across the finish line in 2025. U.S. Congressman Randy Feenstra of Iowa expressed optimism recently to a group of reporters, saying that he believes the farm bill this summer could come to fruition. Congress will have that farm bill on the table, ready to go. One major hurdle in negotiations is the proposed cuts to the nutrition programs, which several Democratic members of the U.S. House Ag Committee have raised concerns about. The committee has until March 27th to identify possible changes. But beyond the Farm Bill, Congress will also need to address the expiration of Tax Credits and Jobs Act at the end of 2025, Feenstra stated. He emphasized there is a need for change to the death tax, noting that the current exemption is set at $7 million, with everything above that taxed at 40%. He pointed out that there are over 200 supporters working to extend this exemption, potentially increasing it to $20 million. Michelle?
Well, it's more positive and light news. It's National FFA Weekend. Every year, FFA chapters around the country celebrate the celebration. It's a time to share what FFA is and the impact it has on members every day. And until the 22nd, FFA members are celebrating. Here are some throwback pictures for you, our listeners, when Delaney Howell attended the 2013 National FFA Convention and Expo. If you didn't know, our own Delaney Howell grew up on a row crop and livestock farm in Iowa, and she didn't know she wanted to pursue a career into agriculture until late middle school, when she had an FFA teacher that helped her grow with many skills. Initially, she went to college as an agriculture education major, but eventually switched after finding her love for broadcasting. I too was active in FFA in Wisconsin. One of my fondest memories was competing in the poultry evaluation career development event, where I was first afraid of holding a chicken, but now because of a grant through the Wisconsin FFA Foundation, I got some chickens in high school. My parents love being chicken farmers, and it's been fun to watch that. As I continue to grow it in my career, and it's been fun just because of FFA, of how impactful it's been. So happy National FFA Week, and hopefully our listeners are celebrating.
Absolutely. This is a very special week out there, especially for all of our listeners and to those who have that strong heritage and tie back. We saw also the Trump administration's plans to impose more tariffs on imported goods as a negotiation tool for potential consequences to U.S. agriculture, especially if other countries will retaliate with tariffs of their own. Chuck Nicholson, an associate professor in ag economics and dairy science from the University of Wisconsin, warns that such trade disputes could come at a high cost to the U.S. ag industry, particularly dairy. He says the United States' three major export destinations for dairy products are Mexico, Canada, and China. Nicholson also explained if we impose trade restrictions on these countries and they retaliate, it could severely limit their ability to sell those key markets. About 40% of all U.S. dairy exports by value go to these three countries, making them crucial to not only the short-term stability, but also future growth. While dairy makes up a relatively small portion of the total U.S. agricultural exports, Nicholson emphasizes that the export opportunities are vital to the industry's success. They're worth about $9 billion, which is significant. However, the broader extent of the U.S. ag exports, dominated by corn, soybeans, and other grains, dairy is just a small player. Still, for the dairy industry, exports remain crucial to revenue sources, and they could not afford to lose them. With trade policies shifting, dairy producers remain concerned about maintaining access to key international markets, knowing that retaliatory tariffs could disrupt sales and impact the industry's long-term growth.
Continuing to talk about animal agriculture, the USDA is forecasting a rise in U.S. beef production, with American livestock farmers expected to produce 26.56 billion pounds of beef this year, an increase of 775 million pounds from last month's estimate. This adjustment is based on higher cattle supplies available for placement and heavier slaughter weights carrying over from earlier in the year. However, the outlook for milk production has been lowered due to a smaller than expected dairy herd in 2024 and fewer replacement heifers as of January 1st of this year. The 2025 all milk price estimate has also been revised downward to $22.60 per hundredweight. Pork production is slightly higher than previous projections, boosted by heavier than expected dressed weights. Total pork production is now forecasted at 7.3 billion pounds, a 2.5 increase from 2024. The poultry sector is, we know, the layer space is seeing some challenges, but broiler production is expected to be lower in the first half of 2025, but higher in the second half. Egg prices have been pushed higher due to the highly pathogenic avian influenza, which has resulted in fewer laying hens. And turkey production has also been revised lower for the year. So a lot's happening in the animal agricultural space, and we'll continue to watch that here.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of adjustments made in that report. We did see some encouraging news for agricultural shipping as the longshoremen's dispute along the Gulf and East Coast moved forward towards a resolution. The feuding parties are making progress in ratifying their new contract, a key development for this industry. Mike Steenhoek, the executive director of Soy Transportation Coalition, says the recent committee's vote was a positive sign. With a resolution in sight, ag exporters are hopeful for improved stability in shipping operations, which again is crucial for U.S. farm products to hit the global markets efficiently.
Well, in this week's interview, we heard from Delaney being in another country, but we're going to talk about the U.S. Soybean Export Council and talk all things exports. From the recent International Production and Processing Expo in Georgia, I had connected with the council's CEO Jim Sutter to talk more about it. Let's get into that interview. Talking all about exports here with the U.S. Soybean Export Council CEO Jim Sutter.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Tell me a little bit about where we're at today for 2025 for markets.
Yeah, so this marketing year started out very strong. We're just over 20% ahead of where we were last year at this time with our export pace. Last year we had kind of limited supplies. This year, the crop that was harvested in the fall of 24 was almost a record. I don't know if we know exactly if it was or not, but a big crop. And so we've had the ability to have strong exports. And the good thing that I like to see is exports to basically all the various destinations we work with are up. So it's not just one destination or a couple. It's really broad-based around the world. So I would say we're off to a very strong start for exports. Now, traditionally, they slow down a little bit as we get into the second half of the year, as South America harvests their crop, because they don't have the same storage capacity the U.S. does. But that's normal. But we've had a real strong start. That's what people should take away.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's a couple reasons. I think first and foremost, I think we have good global demand. And, you may say, why? I mean, if we look around the world, generally economies are doing fairly well. And when they do, people oftentimes, especially in the lower kind of developing emerging market economies, they want to consume more meat. So we see the demand for products like poultry. We're here at the Poultry Show. Demand for poultry on a global basis is up. I've been here talking to people from Pakistan, from Ecuador, from Nigeria. They're all telling me that poultry demand is up. So that's one of the reasons. And I think helping that, maybe also or related to that, is the fact that prices are down. And I know farmers here in the U.S. are not as happy with prices at $10 as they were at $14. But this is a cyclical business, and these lower prices are building a very strong base of demand, which I think is good, as we then eventually we will see prices move back higher again.
So as we look at going to a lot of different countries, where are those opportunities that you're looking at for growth?
Well, let me talk about first, if I can, let me talk about China, because that's the biggest market for soy exports. They're the biggest buyer in the world of all soy global trade, but they're also the number one customer of soy from the U.S. Now, that's a market that we're watching carefully. We've been there 43 years, so we have a lot of long-term relationships there, and people in China like to buy soy from the U.S. So we are, 5 years ago, January 15th, 2020, the Phase 1 agreement between the United States and China was signed with great fanfare between President Trump, President Xi, and everybody thought it was great. Unfortunately, shortly after that, COVID hit, and then we lost track. I think the people lost the focus on the Phase 1 agreement, and then by the time COVID was over, we had a new administration, and they certainly weren't going to push the old Phase 1 agreement. We're looking at the Phase 1 agreement, or maybe a Phase 1 plus or a Phase 2 agreement, something like that, as an opportunity that maybe we could have our new government here work on and take a look at that as a way to go forward. You hear a lot of talk about potentially another trade war, those kind of things. I don't think anybody wins in a trade war. So hopefully, maybe the Phase 1 agreement is something people will look at. It was good before, and I think if they would really fulfill it, it could be really good. So China's a market that we always look at and follow, but we work very hard to diversify to markets all around the world. I mentioned we're here at the Poultry Show right now. There are people here from Nigeria. I mentioned that before. I'm very happy that Nigeria has taken 2 cargoes of U.S. soybeans this year. Now you may say, well, that's only 2 cargoes. Well, it's 2 more than they've ever taken before. And we've been working there for a few years, so it's wonderful to see that coming to fruition. Lots of other markets in South Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas, where we see this growth I was talking about with more soy being consumed. So I think there are a lot of destinations where people want to buy U.S. soy around the world.
So going back to the agreement with China, what does that look like? What is it?
So that agreement, it contains, I think, 32 different sanitary, phytosanitary sort of chapters or provisions where China and the U.S. agree to work together to try and resolve some long-standing or maybe new issues. Now, many of those were already worked on and I think were already resolved, so that's good news. The other part that I think people really tend to focus on, there was a purchase agreement. And in that agreement, it said that China would increase their purchases of numerous U.S. commodities, including agricultural commodities. Now, they didn't 100% fulfill that commitment the last time. As I said, COVID hit. There were lots of things that were sort of interruptions. But that's what it really contained, were some work on technical issues and a purchase agreement. So if people were going to look at it and try and put it in place again, I would suggest it should contain those two things. And, probably with new numbers and readjustment to that.
Now, if we look at the soybean itself, it may be completely different from a farmer in, let's say, Wisconsin to another state because of the practices they use. We keep hearing about carbon intensity and what that looks like. So how do you market that at the national?
That's a great question, Michelle. And it's something that our U.S. farmers should be very proud of, is the sustainability track record, the sustainability data that we are able to put together and market because of the practices that our U.S. soy farmers use. And people may say, well, that's just what I do. I'm taking care of my farm because I want to pass it on to the next generation. Well, but that's so important because people here in the U.S. do take care of their farm. They want to protect the soil. And that's really what buyers around the world want to know about. They want to know that the food that they're buying is not having a detrimental effect on the earth somewhere. When people ask me, what does sustainability mean to customers? That's kind of how I try to break it down. They don't want to be hurting the earth with the food that they're buying and consuming. And here in the U.S., we've got the practices, we've got the data, we've got our U.S. Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol that we could have a way as a way to verify that. It's been benchmarked by many groups around the world and is trusted. So last year, 72% of the export shipments that left the U.S. carried with it a verification certificate, meaning that on 72 of our exports, the buyer cared enough to want one of these certificates that they were able to then say, hey, the soy I'm using in making feed for chickens or making tofu in Japan or whatever they're using it for has been grown in a sustainable way. And I think that's really, that really leads to the whole carbon intensity, the many different ways that people talk about it, but I think it really kind of boils down to that. And the U.S., it's a real competitive advantage for the U.S.
Just one value add for farmers that, they can look at to hopefully increase their income. But if there's another thing or on the horizon that you're really watching to really create back to value for farmers, what are you really watching?
Yeah, so we're spending a lot of time thinking about where do we create value for U.S. soy? And we've done a lot of research over the years on the constituents, the way that U.S. soy, kind of what's on the inside of U.S. soy. And our data continues to show us that there's a superior nutritional bundle made up of strong amino acids and higher energy content. And that really is something that we're trying to make sure we educate people all around the world about. Here at this poultry conference is a great place. We're going to have a big luncheon tomorrow. We're going to be giving presentations about that. And so that's a way that we try to, one of our key strategic goals at USEC is to differentiate the quality of U.S. soy, and then to build a preference based upon that differentiation. And so we have to educate people first to be able to differentiate. And there are things there. There's data to show you that poultry will perform better on soybean meal produced from U.S. soybeans than from soybeans produced to other origins. And we are so proud to be able to talk about that and educate people about that.
A lot of interesting things that are happening in the soybean space. So thank you so much for joining. Is there anything else that we missed that farmers should really be watching, especially when they look at soybean exports?
Michelle, I would say just keep watching the new destinations that are popping up. I talked about China. There's many I could talk about, but we continue to kind of be diversifying the range of destinations where U.S. soy is going. And I think that's really important because you never know when a country might have a financial problem or there could be some other issue. It could be a shipping problem. So the more destinations that we have, the better for our U.S. soybean farmers. They want to have lots of people who want to buy the good U.S. quality soy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
So, Tanner, what's happening in markets this week?
Yeah, we saw a little bit of a shift, some more on the acreage discussion. U.S. farmers are expected to shift more acreage to corn this spring. This is driven by strong prices and a tight global stock, the record ethanol production. Meanwhile, prices for competing crops like soybeans and wheat and cotton continue to struggle. So it's hard there, Michelle, to see a lot of push for farmers to switch back from their original plans of planting more corn acres this spring. But according to a new report from CoBank's Knowledge Exchange, corn acreage is projected to increase 4.2% to 94.5 million acres in 2025. We also saw lower hay prices will also push more farmers to harvest corn for grain rather than silage, increasing corn for grain acreage by 5% to 87.06 million acres. So a lot of things are adding up against that corn market, Michelle. Certainly seems like a lot of sentiment to potentially push prices lower, especially if there is a glut of extra acres and extra bushels entering that market. But as we said, soybeans have seen the biggest decline, with acreage expected to fall 3.6% to only 84 million acres. However, expanded winter wheat planting last fall could help offset some of those losses, as it created a little bit more of an opportunity for those growers to double crop with soybeans after their wheat harvest. I know at the United Custom Harvesters event, there was concerns of a couple of years having drier patterns, which meant less wheat acres were harvested in the past. Hopefully those growers get good crops this year, able to get them on or get them off, and those soybeans back on. Spring wheat acreage in the Northern Plains is forecasted to drop 5.9% to 10 million acres as the strong dollar and last year's larger U.S. wheat harvest put pressure on prices. The planting season will be approaching us. The global market dynamics and weather conditions will continue to influence the farmers' final decisions on acreage allocations itself. So quite an interesting look there. I know we'll continue to dive into some more details there. But Michelle, I'm excited we get to go to Denver. We're going to be out at the Commodity Classic, and you can find Ag News Daily all around, it seems like. Of course, we'll be hosting several interviews throughout the day at the John Deere booth. It'll be fun to see you guys. You're coming out with us, aren't you, Michelle?
Yeah, it should be a fun time to really experience Commodity Classic and in the area that may not be known for corn and soybean production.
Yeah, it will be an interesting one to take in. I can tell you by the emails we've already received, Commodity Classic has a significant focus on whole farm profitability, expanding global markets, finding alternative uses for crops that have traditionally been grown in these areas. A lot of those commodity associations putting a lot of emphasis on the economics of their specific crop, the economics of agriculture in general, as well as trying to bring in some innovative new technologies and ways to use the product. So as you head out to those shows, Michelle, what is your favorite thing about attending new trade shows?
I think when I think about events, it's all about connections and networking, because at the end of the day, farming and agriculture is a human business. It's people. And I think that's what's always neat, is that everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has a story to share, has an experience about what their farm looks like, what they've changed in the past year, some new technologies. And so I really enjoy those conversations that happen at events, various events, but really excited for Commodity Classic. But what about you? Especially, it's a national ag month is March. So
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting show because of the location in Denver, but I think the people that truly are there for the education, the opportunities to build those relationships are going to be fun. And that's what makes it fun for us too. So I do ask, if you see us out and about, hang around. Our recordings are fairly short. You've witnessed a lot of our interviews. So stick around and come say hi and talk to us about your farm. Maybe we'll be able to get you on as an interview as well. But I do have one other piece of news, Michelle. So the United States and Canada hockey teams. Are you a big hockey fan?
not too much. I do like to, I guess, watch the fights, but that's a little excitement.
a lot of drama around an earlier match this week, which the United States did come out ahead. For full disclosure to our listeners, we are recording this Thursday evening to get an early jump on that news release for you this Friday. And I can hear the national anthem playing right now for the start of the championship game. So it'll be interesting to see the outcome of that. And hopefully all of us on the good old USDA team support comes out with a victory. But I'm excited, Michelle, to see you out in Denver. Listeners, as always, we appreciate you tuning in every week. Again, if you've got somebody that we need to talk to or a topic that we need to cover, send us a message, hit us up on social medias. And if you haven't done it in a while, go give us a thumbs up, hit 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, or subscribe on that YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate that. But what do you say, Michelle? Is it time to let the listeners go?
Let's let them go.